For 11 years, Carol Burnett made a lot of people laugh, but in 1977 she did something that made everyone on board cry. People watched the show just once, and it broke their hearts. Some people thought it was clever. Lots of awards came in. She never watched it again, though. In 47 years, never once. It seemed too real to her. She couldn't stand to see herself in the sketch because it was so true to life. What made the best woman in America not want to face her own performance? Her birthday is April 26, 1933, and she was born in San Antonio, Texas. She had pain in her life from the very beginning. Both of her parents were heavy drinkers and couldn't take care of her. Her dad had a job at a movie theater, but he couldn't keep it for long. As much as her dad, her mom drank and wasn't there for her. Both would later die of illnesses caused by drinking. Even though Carol was only a baby, she knew what it was like to be dropped. The people who were supposed to love her most had picked bottles over nighttime stories. It was a lonely and dangerous world, and Carol quickly learned that laughing could keep her from breaking. She was raised by her maternal grandma, Mabel White, after her parents gave up on raising her. They moved from Texas to Hollywood in 1940. But there wasn't a red carpet ready for them. They shared a small room in a run-down boarding house with other people who were also sad. Addicts, renters with mental illnesses, and people on welfare who are desperately trying to hold on to hope. They only had $20 a week, which wasn't even enough for food, let alone a dream. Carol had never had love like Mabel's before, but she gave it to her. She was poor, but she was safe at last. In the middle of all the chaos, Carol thought of a way to get away. It was a fake twin sister named Karen that she made up. In every way, Karen was different from Carol. Beautiful, sure of herself, and always happy. And Carol made her seem so real that even the other renters thought she was real. She would run up the fire escape, change her hair and clothes, and come back as Karen, who was sweet and funny. After a few minutes, she would come back as Carol. These adults, many of whom were barely hanging on, believed it. That says a lot about Carol's acting skills and how much everyone in that house needed something happy to believe in. Many of the escapes were real, though. She and her grandma would go to the movies every Saturday. Each ticket costs 25 cents, which is more than 10% of their weekly income. She forgot about the screaming, the peeling paint, and the fear for those few hours. Life shone on TV. There was food, beauty, order, and dancing stars. However, survival became clear again after the credits rolled. Because they didn't have enough money at home, they would sneak toilet paper from the theater bathroom. Their shame wasn't there, they were desperate. She knew what it was like to be hungry for more than just food when she was only 7 years old. As she sat in that dark theater one day, she heard Johnny Weissmuller's famous Tarzan yell all the way through the room. It was like lightning to her. At home, she started to copy it over and over again, getting better at every pitch and beat. She had no idea that she was working on her singing and learning how to control her breath in a way that most singers take years to get good at. He signed it even though it was just a game. People would later laugh and cheer during her live shows when she made that noise. What began as a child's imitating turned into one of her first comedic skills. Carol's only goal after high school was to become a reporter. She felt like she had to finish what her mother couldn't because her mother had always wanted to be a writer. The plan was to go to UCLA, but when it was time to sign up, she was hit with a harsh truth. She lacked the $50 she needed to pay for school. That's about $600 these days. It would have been the end for most people. It looked like it was for a while. Then something strange took place. Someone else, whose name she never found out, stepped in and paid the amount. Just enough money to make a difference in her life, with no strings attached or explanations needed. She planned to study writing at UCLA, but one class she chose to take in theater turned her whole world upside down. Something inside her clicked in that room. She stopped being shy. She wasn't poor or hard to see. She was loud, funny, and fully living. It was seen by her teachers. Her friends did the same. She could sing, act, and make people laugh all at the same time. Journalism seemed too small for her all of a sudden. She changed her major. It was dangerous, but she wasn't going to make it for the first time in her life. She had a dream. That risk quickly paid off. At the end of her first year, she was named UCLA Theater Program's Most Bright Newcomer. It wasn't just a title, a sign was given. It let her know that following this dream wasn't crazy. It made her stronger, more determined to do well on stage, and less likely to feel bad about wanting more than just survival. The award helped her get better parts in school plays and support from teachers who could tell she wasn't like the other kids. She wasn't just another actor on the rise. You couldn't fake the spark she had. Carol Burnett was a junior in college and worked as an usherette in 1954. She made $65 an hour. At a party in San Diego, her life took a strange turn. She wasn't there to enjoy the party. She was putting hors d'oeuvres in her bag to give to her grandmother when she got home. Then a stranger in a sharp suit walked up to her. He wasn't in show business. He was from La Jolla and made a lot of money building ships. Carol told him that her dream was to make it on Broadway in New York, but she couldn't even pay the $43 for UCLA. She thought the man's offer was too good to be true. $1,000 for her and her boyfriend, Don Soyan. But he told them three things: don't say his name, get to New York with the money only. If they got through, they had to help other people do the same. He didn't want praise. He just said that he was repaying a favor that someone had done for him. After a while, his wife told him that he had done things like this before for gas stations, businesses, and people with dreams. Carol and Don left UCLA after getting the $2,000 they needed. In 1954, they went east, even though Carol had only been to Texas before. She didn't care that she didn't know anyone in New York. When they got to the city, she said, "I didn't know enough to be scared." They stayed at the $9, a night Algonquin hotel. It was too much. The cash began to disappear very quickly. Carol started to cry while calling her family on a pay call. They begged her to come back. Then, just as she was about to give up, she heard something on the radio. Carol, the name of the storm, was moving up the coast. It meant something to her. It made her strong enough to stay. It wasn't long before she was in a whole new world. The club for practicing. The building was old and used by young women who wanted to get into the arts. She shared a room with 4 other actors and paid $18 a week for a cot. There was only 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom, but it was heaven for her. Back at home, she slept on a couch. The place was full of life. Girl groups work on their lines, sing, and run around with hair curlers in. She worked as a hatch check girl at night and went on auditions during the day to make ends meet. It wasn't fancy, but it was true. She and the other girls put on a show called the Rehearsal Club Review in March 1955. They invited managers and producers by mail. People with big names showed up, like Marlene Dietrich. That night, doors began to open. Something really silly gave her her first big break. Author Ken Welch wrote this love song about John Foster Dulles, who was the stiff and very serious U.S. Secretary of State. It was a silly joke song that went way over the top. However, Carol did it so well that it became her trademark. The crowd went crazy. She was asked to be on both the Jack Paar and the Ed Sullivan shows. She walked out on the Sullivan stage on January 6, 1957, with her knees shaking. But by the end of her show, everyone was laughing so hard they could not breathe. In August of that year, she came back to sing the Dulles song again, along with a song that made fun of puppy love. That silly song made her the talk of the comedy world in New York. Carol worked hard for another 5 years. In 1955, she played the girlfriend of a ventriloquist dude on the Paul Winchell show. That got him a part in Stanley with Buddy Hackett, but it was only for a year. Things changed, though, in 1959. An off-Broadway show called Once Upon a Mattress was picked up for Broadway, and Carol got the lead role in it. She played Princess Wilfred, a girl from the marsh who was loud and clumsy, and not at all like any princess from a fairy tale. The show became very famous very quickly. He put her forward for her first Tony Award, and Carol and Don paid back the full $2,000 on June 22, 1959, exactly 5 years after she got that mystery loan. The millionaire didn't answer. He stayed unknown until the end. Carol was making $500 a week at that point, which made her feel like she had won the lottery. The movie Once Upon a Mattress wasn't even meant to be a hit. It began as a small project for summer camp. When it opened on Broadway in May 1959, critics didn't love it, but people did. For 470 shows, the show went from one building to another. What made the difference was Carol's show. The show ended in just 1 week after she left in June 1960. Her replacement only did 8 shows before the show ended for good. Carol was no longer replaceable. The Gary Moore Show then came along. Carol went from being a growing star to a full-on TV star between 1959 and 1962. In 1962, she got her first Emmy. Her role as a cleaning lady became famous, but what that show really did for her was teach her. Gary Moore's unrehearsed cue and a warm-ups gave the Carol Burnett Show its live crowd interactions that would later make it famous. Don Knotts and Jonathan Winters are 2 other big stars who got their start on the show. That show was one of the most important comedy shows ever. It ran from 1950 to 1967. It taught Carol a lot about time, character, and taking risks. There was another amazing event in 1962, this time at Carnegie Hall. CBS wasn't sure if they should let her do a show with Julie Andrews. They said Carol was already on TV every week, and Julie wasn't well known enough. But Michael Dann and Oscar Katz, the 2 executives in charge, saw Carol having a hard time getting a cab one night after a work event. She made fun of the fact that a truck driver might take her home instead. Soon after, a truck pulled up and offered to take her home. They thought it was fate. The show was okayed. 3 big awards were given to that special, Julie and Carol at Carnegie Hall. It got an Emmy and a Rose d'Or. There was even a soundtrack from Columbia Records that made it to number 85 on the charts. But what came next was much better. After the Carol Burnett Show started on September 11, 1967, television would never be the same again. No one thought Carol would be able to break through that wall. ChatGPT said, "The Carol Burnett Show had 30 million viewers every week for 11 seasons, from September 11, 1967, to March 29, 1978. That wasn't just good, it was historic." Not many shows have ever had that many viewers. It was more than just entertainment, it was an event. Time magazine even named it one of the 100 best TV shows of all time, and TV Guide ranked it at number 17. Variety ranked it at number 23. That's how big it was. The show wasn't just about big numbers, though. It changed television by being one of the first to have live comedy skits in front of a studio crowd. Saturday Night Live was influenced by this style, and Carol Burnett, she really broke new ground. She wasn't just another star. She was one of the first women to host her own variety show. At a time when most TV shows were run by men, she broke the rules and made it possible for many women to work in comedy. The show was popular no matter the day or time. People watched it on Monday nights at 10:00 or later on Saturday nights. Fans weren't the only ones who noticed. The Carol Burnett Show won an amazing 25 Primetime Emmy Awards over the course of its 11-year run. That's right, 25. The awards weren't all in one category, either. The show won for writing, musical material, choreography, and, of course, Best Variety Series. Harvey Korman won 4 Emmys for Outstanding Supporting Performance in 1969, 1971, 1972, and 1974. Tim Conway also won 4, 3 for acting and 1 for writing. The show's last season in 1978 went out with a bang. winning many awards, including Best Variety Series. And it didn't stop there. Carol Burnett won 2 Golden Globes in 1977 and 1978 for her work as an actress in a comedy or musical. The show also won the People's Choice Award for Favorite Variety Show 3 years in a row, from 1975 to 1978. Winning so many awards solidified its status as a TV classic. On the other hand, not everything was laughs and applause behind the scenes. During the 7th season, Harvey Korman almost quit for good. That week, Tim Conway and singer Petula Clark were guests, and they were 2 of the nicest people in show business, but Korman wasn't in the mood. He was rude and angry during rehearsals. Carol Burnett usually didn't bother him, but this time she did. After the Friday night taping, she asked him what was wrong and got a harsh answer, "I'm just not happy here." He then slammed the dressing room door in her face, and that was the end of it. Over the weekend, Korman changed his mind and begged for another chance. Burnett agreed, but with one condition: Monday morning, I want to see you skipping and whistling down the hallway at CBS. And that's exactly what he did. He was skipping and whistling when he got off the elevator Monday morning. Korman stayed on the show until season 10. Then came Tim Conway, who was a wild card. He had a rule: never go all out in rehearsals. He saved his best lines for the live tapings, even if it threw everyone off. The best way to describe Conway's chaos was during the elephant story in a sketch from the Family series. He used to say, "Some of it comes on the spur of the moment, and some I keep in the back of my mind." This meant that every performance was different and unpredictable. Harvey Korman said it best: he never does anything the same way twice. Carol Burnett, Vicki Lawrence, and Dick Van Dyke did everything they could to stay in character as he went on and on about a circus elephant. But the story kept getting funnier and stranger until even Vicki Lawrence lost it. She responded with a line that made everyone on set laugh out loud: "Are you sure that little is through?" Things like that became the heart of the show. They were raw, real, and not at all planned. But not every scene was funny. In 1977, something from one of the recurring sketches, The Family, deeply affected Carol Burnett. She played Eunice Higgins, a woman whose hopes and dreams had been dashed. The sketch usually mixed dysfunction with comedy, but this time they took a chance and didn't use any jokes or exaggeration. Instead, they just showed pain. The sketch was called The Gong Show, and Eunice thinks that singing about her feelings on a talent show will finally make her famous. Instead, the judges make fun of her, and one of them was played by Alan Luton, a real-life game show host. Everyone on the set was almost crying by the end because Burnett played the part straight. There was no funny accent or silly movement, and when the episode aired, it didn't lose its power. The camera slowly pulled back on Eunice's tear-stained face as the lights dimmed. There was no music or laughter, just heartbreak. Viewers were stunned. Critics praised it, but Burnett never watched it again. She said in an interview in 2010 that it was too real and that Anand's pain felt like my own. That's because it was real. Burnett grew up poor and knew what it was like to dream big and be laughed at. That sketch hit too close to home. She later talked about how she felt in an interview with Harper's Bazaar. She said, "I'm glad we did it, but that wasn't what our show was about. We weren't there to remind people of their problems, but to make them forget about them." The sketch did leave a mark, though. It became a TV movie in 1982 called Eunice and a show called Mama's Family. Burnett quit the show in the end because he didn't like where it was going, but the first episode became famous. It wasn't all that Carol Burnett did to make people laugh. Behind the scenes, she was going through a lot of heartache, chaos, and family fights that would have broken most people. When she met her first husband, Don Soyan, in college, it all began. They were young in love and both wanted to be famous in show business. Born in Omaha in 1928, he had big dreams of making it big on Broadway. They got married 3 years after meeting at UCLA in 1955, but their love didn't last. After Don's ex-girlfriend's daughter died, he was never the same. Carol's job went up while his stayed the same. The stress broke up their marriage. They broke up on Christmas Day, 1959, and got a divorce in 1962. Don got depressed and drank too much until he died at the age of 62 in 1990. He never got to the point where he wanted to be on stage. Carol was only single for a short time. Soon after, she met Joe Hamilton. Joe was a famous TV director and had 8 kids from a previous marriage. He also put together Carol's 1962 show at Carnegie Hall. They got married in 1963 and worked on her popular show together. Their children were Carrie, Jody, Aaron, and they also had a miscarriage in 1965. Their house was always full, with Joe's 8 kids and their 3. His work as the producer of Carol's show earned him 5 Emmys. Their jobs did well, but their home lives fell apart. There was a false story in the National Enquirer in 1976 that Carol was drunk at a restaurant and sat next to Henry Kissinger. That really hurt her. Not only was it not true, but she had spoken out against drinking for years. She took the newspaper to court and asked for $6 million. The case went on for 5 years and showed how careless newspapers could be. The person who was asked had been told by a paid source that Carol wasn't drunk, but the story was still spread. Even though she won the case, it was settled for about $200,000 after appeals. It wasn't about the cash. The goal was to clear her name, and it changed tabloid news for good. The most important fight of her life wasn't in court, though. It happened at home. By the late 1970s, her daughter Carrie was really hooked on drugs. Carrie used drugs like cocaine, marijuana, mushrooms, and quaaludes when she was only 13. In the end, she said that she did drugs to stop being Carol Burnett's daughter and be her own person. Carol saw her child leave her between 1976 and 1979. She sent her to rehab after rehab. Carrie ran away from a Texas facility at one point. Carol was afraid she would lose her daughter for good. Carrie got clean in the end when she was 17, but it wasn't easy. Carol had to make the most difficult choice of her life. She made Carrie hate her for it, but Carol once told her, "You have to love them enough to let them hate you." They didn't talk for more than a year, but she didn't give up. They became closer than ever when Carrie came back. Carrie got a big part on the TV show Fame, which showed she was talented. They worked together in movies and TV shows, and she even wrote a play about Carol's life called Hollywood Arms. Even though they were joined at the hip, tragedy struck again. She died in 2002 from pneumonia brought on by lung cancer that had spread to her brain. She was only 38 years old. She never saw the first show of Hollywood Arms. Carol felt sorry for herself, but she kept going because I owed it to Carrie. Carol's second marriage ended in 1984. At that point, Carrie's addiction, the stress of their jobs and their relationships, had worn her and Joe Hamilton down. Their 2 younger girls went to live in Hawaii with their grandparents so they wouldn't have to see their parents fight. Once they were no longer married, Joe stayed close to his family until he died of cancer in 1991. But Carol found love again, even though she had been married twice and been through 2 terrible breakups. At a show in Long Beach in the late 1990s, she met Brian Miller. It didn't matter that he was 23 years younger. In 2001, they got married. He was 45 years old and she was 68 years old. Carrie died just 2 months after that. Brian was there for Carol when things were at their worst. They've been together ever since he pushed her to finish Hollywood Arms. In the early 2000s, Carol's youngest daughter Erin was struggling with drug abuse and couldn't take care of her own kid. Carol and Brian did what they could. They took Dylan, their grandson, into their care. Erin's drug use had turned into a nightmare that lasted 19 years. She had been to rehab 8 times and stayed there for almost 240 days. When Erin's house became dangerous for her son, the court stepped in. In July 2020, Erin told her kids that he was going to kill himself. She was put on a mental hold after the police got involved. Soon after, Carol asked the court to become Dylan's permanent guardian. The court gave Carol and Brian temporary custody within a few weeks. She did something else to protect her family, even though it hurt her. When Carol Burnett showed up in the last season of Better Call Saul, everyone was shocked. Even though she was 89 years old, she was still a great actress. She played Marion, an older woman who was kind but smart, and who slowly found out the truth about Saul Goodman. In the episode Waterworks, she went into her kitchen and used Ask Jeeves to find out what Saul was telling lies about. Everything changed when she found it. I believed in you. That moment will never be forgotten. Saul got scared. The anxiety built until she said one thing that broke his heart. He even thought about keeping her quiet for good. Vince Gilligan, who helped make the show, later said that writing a scene where Saul thought about killing Carol Burnett's character was awful. He said she was an American gem, but that's what made it so strong. People were on edge because of her quiet power and shaking voice. Once she was relaxed, she pressed her life alert button and turned Saul in. Some reviewers said it was one of the scariest and best parts of the show's history. The range of Burnett didn't just surprise people that one time. In the 1990s, she was a guest star on the TV show Mad About You. With Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt in the lead roles, the show was already a big hit. The way Burnett played Teresa, though, really made it stand out. She got an Emmy in 1997 for being the best guest actress in a comedy show. She wasn't just a sketch performer after that win. She would be just as good at current sitcoms. Her scenes didn't feel like the loud physical comedy she did on her variety shows. It was less loud, smarter, and really funny. For her guest spot, she won the American Comedy Award for 2 years in a row. It wasn't luck. Because they had done it for decades, they were very good at it. She was nominated for 25 Emmys over the course of her work, and those 2 awards were just 2 of them. As the 2000s went on, Burnett's voice filled in for her onstage comedy. She went straight into animated movies and gave her voice to bright, fun creatures. The movie Horton Hears a Who, a CGI version of a Dr. Seuss book, was her biggest hit in 2008. She was in the movie with Jim Carrey and Steve Carell. It was a worldwide hit and made $298 million, even though it only cost $85 million to make. In 2001, she did the voice of Mrs. Hammer Botham in The Trumpet of the Swan, which starred Reese Witherspoon, Jason Alexander, and Mary Steenburgen. These parts brought her to the attention of kids who had never seen The Carol Burnett Show, but her voice still had the same warmth, charm, and wit. She made a difference even though she wasn't on TV. Her singing was perfect. When Burnett went back to Broadway at the end of the 1990s, it was like coming home. Putting it together, Stephen Sondheim's musical review opened at the Ethel Barrymore Theatre on November 21, 1999, with her as the lead. It was put on 101 times, with 22 previews. Theatre greats like George Hearn, Ruthie Henschel, and John Barrowman were in the play with Burnett as the wife. She hadn't been on Broadway in 30 years, but when she got there, it was like she had never been away. The show was even filmed live for TV and home video releases. The recordings caught both planned and unplanned moments, like when her skirt fell during a scene, and she used it as a joke in the middle of the performance. Even reviewers who didn't love the show as a whole had good things to say about Burnett. Sondheim's difficult music was easy for her to play, showing that her stage presence was still unmatched. And just when everyone thought she was done, Carol Burnett showed up again. This time it will be on Apple TV Plus in 2022-24. In Palm Royale, she played Norma Delacourt, a rich woman from Palm Beach who falls asleep and doesn't wake up until the very end of the show. The part called for a lot. Burnett not only had to do physical comedy, but she also had to make up a kind of nonsense conversation to sound like someone who was just starting to speak again. She made everything up on the spot. No matter what age, that level of improvising is hard, But it was 91 years old. She was nominated for an Emmy for Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series for her work. She was the oldest woman to be nominated for an Emmy in its history. The first episode aired on March 20, 2024, and the show went on to get 11 votes. There were many big names in the group, like Kristen Wiig, Ricky Martin, Laura Dern, and Allison Janney, but Burnett stood out. Once more, new watchers found a woman who had been making people laugh for more than 70 years.